Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Pros Dynasty Football Podcast. I am Ryan Wormeli, joined today by Scott Bogman and by Pat Fitzmaurice. Pat, we are still kind of on the back end, or maybe even in the middle of it, these illnesses we all got in Nashville, the team trip together. We haven't done a Dynasty show together in a couple of weeks because of various scheduling stuff and sicknesses and whatnot, so I appreciate you making the time today while fighting through this cold.
Yeah, well, I appreciate Bogman being willing to do a show with the Infirmary Brothers today. But, that's what happens. I was, before Nashville, I was in Las Vegas. So that was like a week and a half of, maybe not exactly taking care of myself. I think the only fruit I had was like the lime in my vodka tonic. So, time to get back to a healthier routine.
Fitz has a cold and scurvy at the same time.
Immune system working overtime there. Bogdan, I'm surprised that you joined as well. I thought you'd be out celebrating the rumors of Russell Wilson to the Steelers.
You got to start with this already, Wormeli. We just started the show, man. Like, what are you doing to me here?
Listen,
look, that is, it's definitely not clickbait, right? There's no way that a reporter in today's day and age would put something on the line just to get clicks, right? That's so weird.
Impossible.
I don't know how that happened.
No, it's definitely happening. I cannot wait for Russell Wilson in the AFC North. It's going to be a ton of fun.
You'll be really
we'll get
to
all kinds of rumors here
record,
throughout the rest of the show. We are talking today sort of a pre-free agency buy and sell from a Dynasty perspective. We're going to run through the actual free agents that we might want to buy low on or sell high on, and also look at some of the non-free agents who will be impacted by next week's free agency bonanza. I want to mention all of our early 2024 consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. You can navigate from there also to our staff Dynasty rankings on the site as well. I also want to mention that if you guys are looking for more Dynasty talk over on Discord, you can get just that with Scott Bogman and Pat Fitzmaurice. The guys will answer your questions directly. All the analysts are on there too, but those two specifically will be hosting a live Stages next week. That's March 15th at 5 p.m. Eastern. Check that out, fantasypros.com/stages. You definitely want to be involved in our Discord community. You can get your direct, actual league-specific questions answered live from the guys, so be sure to check that out. March 15th, 5 p.m. Eastern. Let's dive in. We got a lot to get through, as always. We'll start, as we always do, with the quarterbacks. Boggs, you and I just did a show yesterday on the main feed with Erickson, kind of a free agency preview. We'll go through a lot of those similar names, but again, from the Dynasty perspective here, more of a value and less of a predicting, direct landing spots necessarily. Let's start with the same guy, though. It's kind of the obvious domino to fall once everything kicks off. It's Kirk Cousins at the quarterback position, obviously coming from the Vikings, maybe staying there. What do you think, Bogman?
I think for all intents and purposes, it is between Minnesota and Atlanta for Kirk, right? I think that is where we're going. We're going with one of those spots, and I think that both are good. We want the shorter window for Cousins, of course, coming off the Achilles, being in his mid-30s. We're looking for a shorter window for him than a guy like Justin Fields, who we'll talk about next. But I think that between Minnesota and Atlanta, there's not really a bad spot for him. I think with Minnesota is where I would prefer him because he has familiarity. We have Jefferson. We have Addison. There's a lack of a run game there as well. We know they're going to be pass heavy. We know O'Connell will just completely scrap the run in some games. So that's my preferred spot. But I think Atlanta is a good spot, too, because we do have Zach Robinson coming over from the Rams to be the OC there with Raheem Morris as the head coach. And we have Drake London. We have Kyle Pitts. We have Bijan Robinson. But there will be games where the Falcons lean a little more into the run because they do have a guy like Bijan Robinson. And if a team can't stop it, you're just going to hand the ball off a bunch of times with Robinson and Algier still on the roster. So I think for, all purposes, it's one of those two teams. I slightly lean towards Minnesota, but I think Atlanta is a good landing spot as well. If he does end up in a wild card, if somebody throws a bunch of money at him, I think every other place is worse than those two, pretty much. The Raiders, I don't know. You still have good options there. That one might be okay. I don't want him in New England. I don't want him in Pittsburgh. So I think between Minnesota and Atlanta, it's about the same. I probably won't knock him too much wherever he lands between those two.
Yeah, Fitz, given his age, I mean, it certainly seems like those two, Minnesota and Atlanta, are kind of the heavy favorites, at least from what you see online. Given his age, is there a landing spot where he could go that would impact his dynasty value too significantly?
I don't think so. Like, I've got him quarterback 29 in my dynasty rankings, which is mainly due to his age. He's going to be 36 in August. But like the appraisal of his dynasty value, I don't think changes that much depending on where he goes. I agree with Bogman. Probably would be best for him from a fantasy perspective to go back to Minnesota and be playing with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison again. But I kind of want him to go to Atlanta and help Drake London and Kyle Pitts take flight. But even if, say, a dark horse Cousins suitor like the Raiders or Steelers were to get involved, like I don't think that would really move the needle on his value that much either. So he's going to do Kirk Cousins things. He's going to be an efficient passer. He's going to make his wide receivers work for fantasy. He's going to throw short of the sticks on third and long in key situations. It's going to be the same old for Cousins. We're going to get another 2 or 3 more years of it, and there's definitely value to that in Dynasty.
Yeah, we touched on that a bit yesterday in terms of where going back to Minnesota might be best for him, but for fantasy managers, it might be better if he goes to Atlanta and we can kind of finally see, those really, really talented young skill position players play with a quarterback who's not Marcus Mariota or Desmond Ridder or Taylor Heineke, and play with an actual real NFL quarterback and see what they can actually do together. So that to me is sort of the more fun option. Also just kind of changes fun and mixing things up. But for his perspective as Cousins himself, I do totally buy the idea that sticking in the offense he knows with the receivers that he's already comfortable with could just be, the best thing kind of all around, and maybe the most likely thing. I guess we'll see what happens. I do want to hit on another quarterback here, and I know this is sort of billed as a free agency preview. I think we have to talk about Justin Fields because during this free agency period, it is likely that we will see him get traded. So that value will change depending on where he's traded, I think. And so will, the values of the players on the team that he gets traded to. So I think he's worth talking about. Fitz, I'll start with you on Fields. Is there a landing spot that you think is both likely and would have a real significant impact on his dynasty value?
Boy, I always kind of figured it was going to be Atlanta. And now the Cousins to Atlanta rumors seem to be picking up steam. I wonder if he is going to wind up in Las Vegas and be reunited with Luke Getsy again, which is kind of interesting. Like, I didn't think Getsy was necessarily the best offensive coordinator for him. It seemed like at times Getsy was sort of, just keeping him on a short leash and like throwing an incessant number of screen passes and just like not letting Fields turn it loose and throw downfield. But at this point, maybe that's the right match for him. And I wouldn't hate it. I mean, he gets Devonta Adams, he gets Jacoby Myers, Michael Mayer. Like, it's an interesting landing spot for him. I don't know if I want him paired with Luke Getsy again.
Where Fitz, before I toss to Bogman quickly, where do you have Fields ranked in Dynasty right now?
QB 11.
QB 11. Okay. And do you think?
Yeah. So
do you think that back end QB1 territory is where he'll be next year, kind of regardless of where he lands, or?
I do. Who would you guys rather have, Jordan Love or Justin Fields?
I would say Love, but that might just be like he ended so well, it's hard not to remember how he finished. What do you think, Bogman?
I would say Love now. I don't think I would have said that before. I thought Fields would be traded at this point. And I think the fact that he's not traded right now has to lower his stock a little bit, because I think with him not getting traded at this point, you have teams that aren't really interested in him where he could start, so maybe he has to go somewhere and back up for a little bit. So I do think it lowers his...
No.
You don't think so?
He's starting somewhere in 2024.
Okay. I think he could start in 2024, but why wouldn't Seattle offer a 2 for him or a 3 for him? And if he goes to Seattle, I don't know that he's starting over Geno immediately. He might. New OC, new head coach there. That's a possibility. But I think that the closer you get to the draft, the more likely you are to be Josh Rosen. I don't think he is that. I don't. I had him at 9 before this. I do think I need to lower him. I had him slightly ahead of Love, but now that you just said that, Fitz, I'm kind of debating in my head whether I'd rather have Love or Fields. I think it's still Fields slightly because of the rushing upside, but I'm not 100% convinced that he has to start no matter where he goes.
It does seem like the trade compensation, like the rumors are that the market is just kind of cooled, and it won't be quite as much as I expected. Like I was expecting when this whole process began and it became clear that the Bears were going to have the number 1 pick and probably be trading Fields, I was expecting that they'd be able to trade Fields for like a mid to maybe even a high second round pick. Like just somebody saying, hey, well, it's not a round 1 pick, but we'll give up a high day 2 pick to get what could potentially be a really high upside quarterback. It seems like that's not the case anymore. So if a team is giving up like a 3rd rounder or even a 4th rounder, that's entirely speculation.
We don't know all the back ends either, Warren. Like they could be be playing chicken with one team that really wants him right now. Yeah. So that could be the case as well. So we're not really sure what his value is going to be, but I think not being traded at this point says more than it doesn't. So it says more than people think, I guess I should say. So
do you Bogman have a landing spot in mind that you think could significantly alter his dynasty value if the trade does go through?
Yeah, I think anywhere he goes significantly alters, and I think it's just such a big range, right? Because if he went to Seattle, they're going to run the ball a lot. So you want him to be Lamar, but they have Walker and Charbonnet, and they just brought in McDonald. I think they're going to pass. They're going to run the ball a lot and not pass the ball as much. I think if he goes to Vegas, where you don't have Josh Jacobs and you have Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers, now he's going to pass the ball a lot. His value becomes more. The ball's in his hands more. So I think there's just with Kirk, there's not a lot of difference. Like you bring in Kirk, you know what he is. He's a pocket passer. He's not going to run. There's not going to be a lot of variance on him. With Fields, I think the variance is all over the place. So it really depends on where he ends up landing.
Would you be happy if it went to the Steelers?
100%. I'd be so happy. I'd be so happy because that means no Russell Wilson, and I don't have to deal with Pickett anymore. And I wasn't a Pickett guy to start, so I don't know. Pickett could still have it. I'm like lukewarm on him. I want him more than I want Russell Wilson. I'll say that, but I don't really want Pickett.
Yeah, so. Fitz, Bogman's not the right person to ask. The right person to ask is me. Would I be unhappy if he went to the Steelers? And the answer is yes. So I'm hoping that does not happen. Let's get into the running backs here. There's a ton of big name running backs. A couple of them are older, so I kind of shied away from them. I think somebody like a Derrick Henry, just given his age, he can't really rise too much in a dynasty setting as a running back when he's already 30. So while he's really intriguing for this upcoming season, I kind of left him off and tried to aim towards the running backs more in their mid-20s rather than their late 20s or 30s. We're starting off with Saquon Barkley because he's the biggest name, obviously former really high pick, has been really highly valued in Dynasty at times, has had a tough situation in New York, is now getting older, kind of towards that late 20s range. But, Fitz, I'll start with you here. Again, is there a landing spot for Saquon that you think we could even see his Dynasty value rise despite the fact that he's getting older?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Seeing him maybe in Baltimore would be great. Seeing him as the featured back for the Cowboys or the Texans, those are pretty attractive landing spots. And he's getting older, but he just turned 27. So theoretically, he's in the prime of his career. My main concern with Barkley is that he has not been very efficient in the passing game since 2019. Like over the last 3 seasons, he's averaged, 6.5 yards per catch and 4.7 yards per target. Those are pretty pedestrian numbers for a running back. And like that, we thought that was going to be the special sauce with Barkley, that he was magic in the passing game. And we saw it really early in his career. We had seen it in his college career at Penn State. But I don't know, maybe he's still got that. I guess maybe we wouldn't see that magic in the passing game with Baltimore because Lamar is not really a dump-off guy. But with Houston or Dallas, that'd be pretty interesting.
Yeah,
I
think that's
spots.
Really intriguing, that Houston one. Bogman, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, I love those spots. One more I'll throw out to you guys. How about the Chargers? Put him in L.A. with that, with Jim Harbaugh, and you have a good quarterback in Justin Herbert to dump the ball off to him, and we know they're going to be a hard-nosed running team with Harbaugh at the helm. I think that could be a good spot as well. But Houston is most likely, and that's what I want, so I can go see him play eventually, because that's what I really want.
Well, Houston's so interesting, especially seeing what CMC has done in the Shanahan offense, and obviously Houston retaining Bobby Sloak for another year, but also having a much better quarterback than the Shanahan offense has typically had. I think that would be really fascinating. I hadn't considered the LA one. We've talked a lot in free agency previews about Austin Eckler leaving. We haven't really talked so much about who would be going to replace him. And I think Saquon, I know that the Chargers are not they don't have that big of a cultural footprint in LA, but just the idea of Saquon in LA feels kind of fitting, right? He's kind of a big time, star type of personality, but also would be a really interesting fit given what we know Harbaugh and Greg Roman want to do. So I think that's a really intriguing.
They don't have a lot of money to spend. I think that's the big thing, and that's probably why we haven't heard that, because currently they're still $20 million over the cap. They got to make some big cuts. I think Mike Williams saves them most of that, though.
You pretty much don't hear any free agents tied to LA because of the situation.
Speaking of spending money, should we talk about the nightmare scenario for Saquon or any of the other top running backs?
Staying in New York?
No, Tennessee.
Yeah.
And Tennessee's got a lot of money to spend and a lousy offensive line and, not a great situation at quarterback.
But isn't anything for Saquon better than the Giants? Because, I know you talked about how he hasn't been good in the past game since 2019, but they haven't had any weapons since 2019. It's been stacked boxes that he's facing, and everyone knows he's getting the ball. So I think just going anywhere with someone
wouldn't
else
that be the same
offense.
in Tennessee? Where
lateral move, exactly.
Hopkins is better. And by the way, the line is terrible in Tennessee, and it's still way better than it was with the Giants. Still way better than it was with the Giants. At least you have guards in Tennessee. You need to fix those tackles, which they can do in the draft. And you have Callahan, which will stretch the field a little bit more, so you won't have all those stacked boxes. So I still think that Saquon going pretty much anywhere, unless he was to end up in Carolina, is a positive for him.
I was going to ask actually if the worst case scenario was New York, but I do see the case made for Tennessee as well there. I know that in some of our previous free agency preview discussions, Josh Jacobs has been talked about as a potential Tennessee fit, just given that they like kind of the hard-nosed guy that they can run into the ground, which we saw just 2 years ago, with the Raiders for Jacobs. He's the next guy I want to talk about. Boggs, I'll start with you. Where do you see Jacobs' dynasty value right now, and where it might change based on his landing spot?
Yeah, right now, I have Jacobs, right middling. I have him ahead of Rachaad White because I do think they're going to bring somebody in there. But I have him behind Barkley and Etienne and Kyren Williams, guys like that. So I have him kind of middling as RB 12-ish. I haven't put the rookies in with mine yet. But I think Tennessee actually fits because you have a young quarterback in Levis. You are going to pass more. They have so much money to spend. I think that line is going to be fixed going into the draft, and then they could still spend a pick there or two. So I think that, and he has, Nick Foles, their OC, was on the Raiders staff for a long time, so he has a relationship built there. So to me, I'm already locking in Jacobs to Tennessee in my brain because they have money to spend and he has familiarity. So I like that spot a lot for him.
Fitz, would you be more interested in that landing spot for Jacobs than you were for Saquon?
No, I think it would still be kind of a lousy landing spot. I'd much rather see Jacobs in Dallas or Houston or Baltimore.
I agree with that, by the way. I think all those spots are better than Tennessee.
I do like Fitz. Before you continue, we talked about this a little bit yesterday. I'm curious your opinion. I think Jacobs is the best free agent running back option, given combination of age, what he's done in the NFL style. I fit anywhere. I really like Jacobs compared to some of these other guys. What do you think?
I agree with you, Worm. I've got him running back 11 in my dynasty rankings, one spot ahead of Saquon. And Jacobs just turned 26 last month. Tough runner between the tackles. I love how he seems to relish contact. He's got a history of being able to handle workhorse duty, and he's actually been a more efficient pass catcher than Saquon Barkley over the last 3 years.
Well, let me ask you this. If Barkley goes to Dallas and Jacobs ends up in Tennessee, who do you like more?
Saquon.
Okay.
Then I got to flip him.
Yeah, all right. So, I mean, there's just a lot of context for landing spots.
Sure.
So, but we're going to find all this out. Like, I love NFL free agency because it's done in like 48 hours. You know, it's not like baseball free agency. We're still waiting for Blake Snell and JD Martinez to sign. You know, the NFL is done like during the tampering period. It doesn't even get to the actual date most of the time. So we love that.
Is there, by the way, is there any logical explanation for the 2-day tamper? It reminds me of the scene in Spinal Tap where Rob Reiner's asking Nigel, the lead guitarist, about his amplifier and why it goes to 11, and like, can't you just make 10 louder and have that be the highest number? Like, why not just start free agency on Monday?
Yeah.
Do you really need 2 days of tampering? And then,
I think
like,
because it was
going to
happen anyway. They're going to have the tampering period, so they just call it the legal tampering period.
I once heard that as a reason for why they don't lower the drinking age. They're like, well, it's 21, knowing that people will kind of start early. If you lower it to 18, then they'll start earlier from that.
So you guys really think that there are no conversations going on between agents and teams?
Of course there are, but if you get caught, you lose picks like the Dolphins did. So you try not to do that.
Fair.
Yeah, I think one thing, quickly too, Bogman, you mentioned like having kind of, slotted in the rookies yet. This isn't necessarily a rookie class where you're going to have guys that are usurping RB1s. I wouldn't think, barring some unforeseen development. So I think kind of where we talk about at least these top end free agent running backs is probably, again, barring something unforeseen, where we'll see them, by the time we get to the draft and beyond in terms of dynasty rankings. I want to talk about Tony Pollard, a guy that a lot of people, pretty much every fantasy analyst was super high on going into last season, none higher than Debro. And now, coming off a down year, but there was still some stuff to like in the second half. There's still the possibility he gets in a pretty good landing spot. Fitz, I'm curious, what do you think about Pollard's dynasty value heading into free agency?
So I've got him RB16, and it's hard to tell how much of it was his efficiency not carrying over from a limited role to an expanded role, which I think it's understandable that the more exposure a player gets and the more volume he gets, maybe, that outstanding efficiency just isn't going to hold. But it's also that maybe he wasn't healthy for much of last season. Like, he had that tightrope surgery after he was hurt in the 2022 playoffs, had I forget who it was. Was it Jimmy Ward who did that hip drop tackle on him? And, I think he had like a hairline fracture in his fibula or tibia or something like that, in addition to a very severe high ankle sprain. So he had surgery for that. And I think Pollard himself has said he was not fully healthy until maybe like the second half of the season.
I think it was week 11 is what he said.
Yeah. So maybe we do get something of a rebound from him. Like, he's an intriguing guy. It seems like maybe Dallas is ready to move on. So maybe he winds up in one of these really intriguing spots, Houston or Baltimore. We haven't mentioned Minnesota. They're going to need someone. They've released Alexander Madison, and I don't think they're counting on Ty Chandler to be their featured back. So, he's an interesting guy, but I think I'd be willing to buy in on him in Dynasty if anyone, if his current stakeholder was somewhat disheartened by the way 2023 worked out.
Bogman, what do you think?
I think that's perfect. Exactly what Fitz said. I'll give one more. How about we put him in Philly to aggravate the Cowboys because they need a running back as well. So I think that could be a good land. My whole vision for Philly was Bucky Irving. Take Bucky Irving. Take Bucky Irving. And he was so miserable at the combine that now I think in the mock I gave him Trey Benson. I gave them Trey Benson. So they're definitely looking for someone as well. So
yeah, Fitz, you missed. We talked yesterday about the NFC East, just like spin the roulette wheel, and it basically Saquon to Dallas, Pollard to Philly. I think Erickson might have had DeAndre Swift to the Giants, or that might have been Bogman, but it was kind of just like everybody rotating around within the division, a division that hates each other. So yeah, really fun. I do want to ask about DeAndre Swift, and Boggs, I'll start with you here. Swift is a guy whose dynasty value has basically gone down ever since he came into the league. seemingly there's still talent there. I mean, not even seemingly. Like, he had flashes, even just last season in Philly, of course, behind a really nice offensive line and everything like that. Do you see him more as like a sell high given how he started last year, or maybe a buy low given he might have a different role somewhere else where he goes? How do you evaluate Swift?
I'm selling him until I know where he ends up, right? Like, I think back to Philly is probably the best spot for him, because he did play well there. And how much do you want to push Jalen Hurts into piles as he gets older? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's a move that works now, but I don't know if you keep doing that Jalen Hurts will have back problems, or his hands will get gnarled up in helmets in there or something. Like, I just don't want to keep doing that with a guy that you're gonna have to pay a ton of money to keep. So I think whoever is the running back in Philly will have more touchdown opportunities this season for two reasons. Number one, because Kelsey is gone, as you mentioned yesterday in that show, Worm. He was an enormous part of the tush push being successful because so many teams tried to copy and could never get it right. So I think that's a big part of it. So I think Philly makes sense. I think a team with a high passing offense, we're going to pass the ball a lot in Tennessee under Callahan, right? So I think that's a spot. I think Minnesota is a decent spot for him as well. So, but I think Philly owns the most for his top end potential. That's where I'd like to see him back. I just don't know if they're going to do it.
Fitz, what do you think?
I think he'd probably have to take a hometown discount to stay in Philly. And he is a local guy, so maybe that's a possibility. But we did see the Eagles let Miles Sanders walk the year before when he was coming off a really big year. Mm-hmm. So other than that, though, I mean, I agree with Boggs. It was interesting that we thought maybe that was just the dream landing spot for him in Philly after he had, 300 rushing yards combined in weeks 2 and weeks 3 against Minnesota and Tampa. Like, that was spectacular. After that, though, only averaged I think for the season he averaged 4.6 yards per carry. But after week 3, it was 4.0 yards per carry because he just dominated so much in those first couple of weeks. He's still kind of a mystery guy, Detroit obviously soured on him. I guess whether Philadelphia makes any sort of earnest attempt to retain his services will kind of speak volume about what the NFL has decided on DeAndre Swift right now.
That's a good point.
We know he got the big thumbs down in Detroit after being there for a while. And, one of those guys who it seems like he has this really nice skill set and I don't know. It seems like he still hasn't found the right home, maybe.
Quickly, Fitz, before we move on for the running backs, of these four, Saquon, Jacobs, Pollard, and Swift, who would you sort of classify as the biggest buy low potential of them heading into free agency, and who would you say is the most sell high option?
Sell high, Saquon, buy low, Pollard.
What do you think, Bogman?
Flip it for me. Buy low Saquon. I think Saquon's value is as low as it's going to get over the next 3 seasons because the Giants are miserable. So I still believe in Saquon. And Pollard, I don't know. Pollard's been hurt a bunch. As soon as we put him in this spot where he gets all the carries, he gets hurt. So I think if I'm selling high on somebody, it's probably Pollard.
By now, most of you have probably heard of Reality Sports Online, the powerful fantasy sports platform where owners get to build and manage their fantasy team like an NFL general manager. But the question is, have you tried it? It's time to go see what all the buzz in the Dynasty community is about. Free agency, multi-year contracts, a rookie draft, multi-team trades, franchise tags, contract extensions, first-round rookie options, automated contract and salary cap functionality, and much, much more. Think it sounds complicated? It's not. The best thing about Reality Sports Online Fantasy Front Office is that it doesn't take any more time than a standard league. It just requires more strategy. Think you're among the fantasy elite? Well, this is the platform to test your mettle. Still not sure? You can test out your general manager skills for free in a mock free agency auction. If you like what you see, use the promo code FantasyPros to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. That's promo code FantasyPros to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. Fantasy just got real at realitysportsonline.com. Guys, let's move to the wide receivers here. As we talked about on yesterday's show on the main feed, kind of the biggest names are sticking with their teams. Mike Evans re-signed, Michael Pittman Jr. and T. Higgins were, given the franchise tags. So the free agency class is not quite as appealing. And as we also talked about yesterday, the rookie class is so strong that I think a lot of NFL teams are going to say, why give big money to Gabe Davis, for example, when I can go spend a day 2 or 3 pick on a guy who probably has a higher ceiling and will be a lot cheaper and under team control for many years. The 3 free agents I really want to hit on here are Calvin Ridley, Marquise Brown, and Gabe Davis, just to give everybody a sense of kind of the tier we're working in with the wide receivers, at the top of the free agency market, given what we have here. That's enough preamble. Fitz, I'll start with you. Calvin Ridley, I think, is sort of the biggest name here. At least he's done the most in the NFL to date. Where do you see his dynasty value coming off a really weird last couple of years for him?
Yeah. Boy, I don't know. I think I've got him like wide receiver 30 or something like that for dynasty. And I feel like that could be way too low or way too high. He is just a hard guy to put a value on. Like, had that monster season in 2020, 90 catches, 1,374 yards, 9 touchdowns, averaged 2.44 yards per target. Last year, 1,000-yard season, but 1.57 yards per target. Just not nearly as effective. You thought he was going to maybe go off after Christian Kirk got hurt. And by the way, Christian Kirk, the poster guy for like wide receivers getting the bag in free agency. Yeah. I don't think that's going to happen this year with the
It's almost going to be like running backs, right? Fitz, like we're flooding the market with wide receivers after this draft class. So
you would think
they should be pretty cheap here pretty soon.
Yeah, but like Ridley didn't explode like you thought he would after Christian Kirk got hurt. And oddly enough, it seemed to be like whenever Zay Jones was healthy, Calvin Ridley did better. And when Zay Jones was hurt, like Calvin Ridley disappeared. It was just this weird dynamic with Ridley last year. So I don't know quite what to make of him, or like what would be. Have you guys thought about like a landing spot that you would like for Calvin Ridley? It seems like the teams that most need him are not necessarily good spots for him, like Carolina, or
New England.
New England, exactly.
I think my favorite spot for Ridley Worm is the Jets, right? Like they don't have much next to Garrett Wilson. You're getting Aaron Rodgers back. We assuming through free agency and the draft, you're going to improve that O-line. So I think getting a guy like Calvin Ridley with some speed next to a guy like Garrett Wilson, who's a do-it-all guy, I think that would be a good spot for him, because I do think he'd be better in a spot where he's the 2 versus the 1.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar in terms of I think he's better as an elite complementary piece than as the guy that has to be the guy. I really don't know that there's like an obvious spot. I do wonder, and people are going to say it's like because I'm a homer. Lamar really liked Calvin Ridley, back in that draft, because obviously Lamar was drafted in the same year as him. But they talked in the pre-draft process a lot about how he really was a big fan of Calvin Ridley. I don't know if that is something that would still play out, several years later. But that it is, the Ravens are a team where they have like a Mark Andrews and a Zay Flowers, and so they don't necessarily need really to be the number one guy. I don't know that it'll be Baltimore. They don't have a ton of money, available.
They're going to give what money they have to Henry, right? We all know that. So.
yes, of course. Come on. But that type of team, that type of setting where there are other options already, it's already a good offense that he's just going to be kind of that other piece. And I'm using the Ravens as an example, but I think there are other teams out there like that. I think it's probably the best fit for him. I don't know that there's a spot out there, and Fitz, correct me if I'm wrong, where if he goes there, I'm going to definitely raise his dynasty value. I think the only options are dropping it if he goes to like Carolina or something.
Yeah, that's the thing. He goes somewhere where they've got a healthy passing game and a good quarterback, and it's going to be a team where there's target competition. Or he can go somewhere where he's the alpha, like, as we mentioned, Tennessee again, like New England. Who was the other one we just talked about Carolina, yeah. So it's kind of a tricky situation here. I don't know what I would rather see, him be the alpha with a lesser quarterback, or go to some place where he had to share targets.
I would rather get the worst corner on him. That's what I want. So like
Right.
New Orleans. I don't know where they would get money. The cap is a joke. They've already shaved $70 million off, so I don't know how much more they can. But like New Orleans with Olave, the Jets with Wilson, as you mentioned, Worm, the Ravens with Andrews and Flowers taking targets. I think those are all better spots for what he is currently at 29.
You know what I'd really enjoy seeing is him in Arizona when they also still draft Marvin Harrison.
Right.
And then pairing him with a guy like that, I think would be super fun. And
put him in Washington with T-Mac, right? Like, I think that's a good spot too. Kingsbury's offense, where they're going to pass a ton. So he'll get the worst corner and he'll get more targets. So something like that.
Maybe Chicago, behind DJ Moore, one of these types of places I think would be intriguing. Speaking of Arizona, Marquise Brown is also a free agent. I really don't know what's going to happen with him. Fitz, I'm not to throw Erickson under the bus, but on yesterday's show, I couldn't believe he put Marquise Brown in Los Angeles with the Chargers as his predicted landing spot, and Brown asked for a trade away from the Ravens because of the Greg Roman offense, so I don't know why he would voluntarily sign up for it. I know the Chargers need speed, but it just feels like, I don't know that he hated the guy personally, but he hated playing in the Greg Roman offense. So I found that to be really shocking from Erickson yesterday. Where do you see as an interesting landing spot for Hollywood Brown, and is there one that might make him a good buy low right now?
Yeah, how about the Chiefs? Like the Chiefs, an organization that clearly values speed at wide receiver. And that would be nice because as good as Rashee Rice was, he is a certain kind of receiver, and he is not a lid lifter, downfield guy. He is a short area catch and run guy. So get someone who can run the deep stuff, give Patrick Mahomes a target to, when he wants to stretch the arm. Like, that would be the one. And I mean, I don't know. I've thought Marquise Brown is sort of an overrated fantasy asset for a while. I mean, he just did turn 26, so that's good in Dynasty. But he's only had 1,000-yard season, and even then it was just barely 1,008 yards in 2021. 6.5 yards per target over the last 3 years. Like, I think he's kind of got his role, and that is as the take the top off the defense guy. And those guys are tricky fantasy assets to manage because, like, some weeks are great, and then there are 3 weeks in a row where he doesn't get more than 35 yards. So one of those guys who I would rather have in a best ball dynasty league than in a managed league for sure. But man, if you're going to get me excited about him, Kansas City is one of the landing spots that would do that.
I think you could probably say that for just about any wide receiver if they go to Kansas City.
Yes.
But I take your point about the speed, yeah.
I think with Marquise, though, it might be the only place where you say, okay, this is where he goes and he really boosts his value. Because, let's say he goes to the Chargers, right? Like, out of all awkwardness and whatever with Greg Roman, we know they're turning into a run first offense. So that's just no good for him. I think Washington, maybe with Cliff Kingsbury as the OC, with a defense that's still bad, that's going to have to play point for point. Make him the third in Miami. Make him the third there. I think that would be fine for him as well. But I mean, when we were doing our initial rankings earlier before the combine and before the draft, obviously, Fitz was the low man on Marquise with a bullet. He had him at like 60. So we know Fitz is not respecting Marquise too much anyway, and neither am I. I think he might be washed. So I don't.
Well, it's the opposite. It's the opposite too of what we just said about the running backs, where the class is not such, the rookie class is not such that it's going to knock down these guys when they eventually get drafted. The rookie wide receiver class will. All the types of guys we would talk about today are in a tier such that a dozen rookie wide receivers going to be over them? I mean, that's probably extreme, but it's like, I don't think that far off. The class is that good that I think we really will see these sort of wide receiver 3 types in Dynasty will very quickly become wide receiver 4s come the end of April. There is one more. I mentioned him earlier, Gabe Davis. Fitz, again, I'll start with you. I mean, this is a guy, he couldn't figure it out when there were targets aplenty in Buffalo and he was playing with Josh Allen. Can he kind of take a next step somewhere else? To me, it feels like his dynasty value has nowhere to go but down. What do you think about Davis?
agree. If you can't make it work with Josh Allen, it's just he doesn't earn enough targets to be a week in, week out fantasy asset you can rely on. He's averaged 4.7 targets a game over his career so far. And as you said, Worm, like, how is it getting any better than it was with Josh Allen? You know, a guy who's not shy about being aggressive throwing downfield. So, yeah, you know, they're going to be the big games and the big plays with Gabe Davis. There always are. But as far as being like an alpha receiver, I don't think that's the kind of guy he is.
Bogman, we hit on Davis a bit already yesterday, but from a dynasty perspective, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he's a one-trick pony, right? He is. He had that huge game against the Steelers where he had like 170 yards and 2 scores on his 2 catches, like the 96-yard bomb and then an 80-yard bomb or whatever. And that is what is keeping him in relevance recently. So, I mean, look, you want to know where he's going to end up? Where they love to throw bombs and see the wide receiver drop them when they're wide open, the New York Giants. So that's probably where he'll end up. So.
If you guys are anything like me, you have had plenty of terrible experiences buying tickets. I've been to so many games over the years where the ticket buying experience was so bad, I almost just didn't even bother going to the game. Hidden fees that raise prices by obscene amounts, not to mention when you can't even tell if you can trust the seller, how good the views are from the seats, and of course, there are never any available deals to make it just a little more affordable. Thankfully, Game Time is here to solve those problems. You shouldn't have to worry when buying tickets, and with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of the ticket buying process. I was on the app earlier this morning, and it really stood out just how easy it is to navigate. The ticket buying experience is smooth. It's immediately clear which tickets are the cheapest and where exactly those seats are. And at the top of the screen, I can see flash deals to make sure I'm getting the best absolute price. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total up front so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. And it's so simple. You can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code FANTASYPROS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code FANTASYPROS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Guys, let's go to the non-free agents that we think are going to be impacted by free agency here. We can kind of take this in whatever direction we want, but these are the guys whose value might go up, it might go down. They might be good buy low options, might be good sell high options ahead of the free agent frenzy coming next week. Bogman, let's start with the quarterbacks again. Who stands out to you as a player that could see their value change?
I think there's 2 big ones at quarterback, and it's Aidan O'Connell with the Raiders, depending on what they want to do at that position, because the draft position is middling. They're gonna have to pay a lot to move up to get one of those big 3 guys. It's not impossible, but it is improbable. So then you look at the free agent market, and there's not much there either. So it's either take a rookie like Penix, or maybe trade down and try to get McCarthy as the 4th quarterback off the board, or Penix, Bo Nix, and stick with Aidan O'Connell. So I think there is a chance that Aidan O'Connell sticks. And then the other one is my boy Kenny Pickett here. If the Steelers do end up signing Russell Wilson or bringing Mason Rudolph back, I think that's a sign that Pickett is dead in the water. But I don't think that's going to happen. So I think he's going to end up being the starter under Arthur Smith for at least a season to see what he has and go from there. But, if they do end up signing someone, he would obviously lose pretty much all of his value.
Fitz, what do you think about those 2, Pickett and O'Connell? Not really dynasty starters right now as it is, obviously, but any chance for kind of value movement here?
I don't know that there is. I mean, I think these guys are rosterable in Dynasty, but I think they are like QB4 types for you. Like, ideally, you've got 3 quarterbacks who are starting somewhere. I don't know that these guys are going to be starters for the long haul, but they're at least good enough to be like top backups.
Yeah, and in super flexes where their value stands if they have any.
Yeah.
So
talking super flex for sure. In 1 QB, you're probably not even rostering these dudes.
Yeah.
I want to actually jump ahead to the tight ends because we didn't hit on any of them for the actual free agents because there just aren't that many super relevant ones. Bogman, again, I'll throw it to you. Who stands out to you as a couple of tight ends that, again, based on what we see in free agency, could be buy low or sell high options?
Yeah, I don't know if it's so much free agency necessarily, but these three guys I think are going to be affected the most going into this season, and I think it's Chigoziem Okonkwo with the Titans because they're in play for Brock Bowers, right? So that's a big one. I think Greg Dulcich because I don't know if Denver is completely sold on him yet, and he's been banged up. And then Cade Otton with the Bucs. It's a team that likes to pass a lot. His value is decent. He is a top 24. We do have tight end premiums, and two tight end leagues are more and more popular these days. So these guys are, they're not necessarily tight end ones, but I think those are the guys that will be the most affected. And potentially Bellinger, if Darren Waller decides to retire, I guess he's been kicking around. So,
Fitz, what do you think about the tight end spot?
Yeah, Okonkwo is an interesting case because, he was a popular sleeper pick a year ago, and it just kind of didn't happen. And yeah, obviously if Bowers winds up in Tennessee, that completely obliterates any enthusiasm for Chigoziem Okonkwo. But, I don't know. I think we should not totally abandon hope with him. What we saw from him 2 years ago was pretty exciting.
He could get traded, too. If they go ahead and take Bowers, new coaching staff, new regime there, he could get flipped during the draft. No issue. It wouldn't be surprising.
Yeah, and he is a fun guy to watch with the ball in his hands. So I'd just like to see a team that maybe endeavor to get the ball in his hands a little more often.
Yeah, you don't need to sell me on Chigoziem Okonkwo. You know that for sure.
Maryland.
That's right, of course.
Of course, he a Terp. Let's talk about the running backs. Boggs, you wrote down a bunch of them here, so I'll kind of let you steer which direction you want to take it. But again, a position where the rookies are probably not going to usurp a lot of veterans right away, at least. But, there's a lot of role players in this rookie class that could maybe by the second half of the year, again, take away from the role players that are already in the NFL, if not the 3 down backs. What do you think about, kind of the dynasty values shifting here?
I think if you're talking top-end talent, just who is next to guys like Travis Etienne, Kyren Williams, and Rachaad White? Because all three of those running backs are the teams want to pull touches away from them. They got too many touches last season. Obviously with Kyren, he got hurt, right? Etienne had the second most touches, or the third most touches in the league. I think it was CMC. I can't remember who number 2 was, and then him. So, Etienne is way too many touches. Rachaad White, way too many touches. So I think those guys all need a back next to them. So maybe those touches come down a little bit. And then just in terms of, these teams could take someone and then that guy could be the main guy and the guy in the job loses a lot. Tyjae Spears, who's currently ECR RB20, Brian Robinson with Washington. He might be affected just because the offense is going to be way different. Jerome Ford, what is happening with Nick Chubb, right? Nick Chubb is coming off a major knee injury, leg injury really, where his leg was demolished, and he's making a lot of money, and the Browns are a little bit cap strapped. So are they cutting him? Are they restructuring him? What's happening with him? And that affects Jerome Ford a ton. So I think there's a little bit there. And then, it's kind of a mess in Chicago. Roshan, Khalil Herbert, what are we doing there? Are the Raiders bringing in somebody with Jacobs gone? Or is Amir White getting the job? And then Ty Chandler is currently the number 1 in Minnesota. You've got to assume they're bringing somebody else in. And then Bigsby, they're saying all the right things about Bigsby, but I don't know if they believe it, because if he was good, I think he would have had touches last year to take away from Travis Etienne. So those are the guys that I'm really focused on in terms of their value moving up or down during free agency in the draft.
Yeah, I'm really interested in the Spears one. I think Tyjae Spears might be a really interesting sell high right now because so many people are looking at it as Derrick Henry is going to be gone. This is an opportunity for a guy that a lot of people thought was really talented. Obviously, he had the interesting, injury stuff on draft day, but we have talked on 2 shows this week about the Titans as a team that are maybe possibly going to go out and add like a Josh Jacobs type. And if they do, that's going to really hurt Spears. I think, at least. I don't think he would be in my top 24 at that point. Fitz, what do you think about Spears as a guy that might be a good sell high right now if you really do think the Titans are going to add somebody at the position?
You framed it well, Worm. If I were a Titans fan, I would not want to see my team spend big on a running back when there are so many holes at other spots on the roster. I'd rather see the higher leverage positions addressed first. But, man, like, I want to see Tyjae Spears get his chance. And I don't know if he has, like, a long-term run in him as a featured back without an ACL in one of his knees. But, like, we saw Ajayi, who I think was, like, didn't he also...
Yeah,
not have an ACL in one of his knees.
He was a bottle rocket too. His career was real fast. So,
but he did have one pretty terrific season. 2016, 1,200 rushing yards, the RB11 in half-point PPR fantasy that year. So maybe 2024 could be to Tyjae Spears what 2016 was to Ajayi. I'd love to see it. The Titans should just draft a running back on day 3 of the NFL draft.
Get Braylon Allen.
Not even Braylon Allen, because I think Braylon Allen takes a day 2 pick. I mean, like Kamani Vidal or someone like that on day 3.
Fitz just doesn't want to see his boy Braylon Allen in Tennessee. I think that's what it is. So wouldn't be shocking. Fitz, what do you do with Nick Chubb if you're the Browns? You cut him, save the money because running backs are cheap and Ford look good. I mean, I know, but he's kind of the heartbeat of the team and the people love him. So, I said they're going to cut him and I got yelled at. So, I don't know. What do you think?
I know the Browns, I don't know that they need any more bad PR, and cutting Nick Chubb would be such bad PR. By the way, one more running back I want to mention, like Zamir White. Like if the Raiders don't bring in a significant free agent and don't spend a day 2 pick on a running back, Zamir White as an early down back suddenly has, and maybe we're a little less interested in him for Dynasty because Dynasty leagues are almost always PPR, and I think PPR sort of devalues Zamir White a little bit because he's not really that great a pass catcher, more of an early down guy, but man, he's an early down guy who could conceivably get 250 carries if he were to be the lead guy for the Raiders this year.
Boggs, let's wrap up with the non-free agent wide receivers. The first guy you have written down, I will just highlight because I think he's such an obvious one, Drake London. If they get a healthy Kirk Cousins or, insert any capable quarterback here, we've talked about it a lot already. I mean, sky's the limit for a guy like London and also, Pitts and everybody else in that offense. But I think London is a very obvious buy low if you're in a league where they're not thinking about it like that. The thing is, I think probably a lot of people are thinking about it the same way, too, where they're really excited to see the new quarterback there. So in addition to Drake London, who else are you thinking about in this section?
The Broncos guys, Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. Sutton was all touchdown production last year. Jerry Jeudy can't catch a football. So I don't know what they're doing with him. I think he sucks. So I'm so surprised. I thought he was a for sure lock, great wide receiver prospect. He's been so bad in Denver. And, his whole beef with Steve Smith was a whole thing there as well. Quentin Johnston, what is happening in, L.A.? Are they cutting Mike Williams? Are they cutting Keenan Allen? That's going to save a lot of money and they're cap strapped, right? And we have a whole new regime here that's going to want to run the football. So I could see both those guys gone. And now maybe Quentin Johnston's all of a sudden a number 1 on this team if they don't spend high on a wide receiver early in the draft. So I think he's a possibility to move up, as is Josh Palmer. Treylon Burks with Tennessee. Are we giving him another shot or not? I'm done. I've seen enough. He's been too hurt. I don't think it's going to work. Availability is the best ability. He hasn't been on the field, right? So, and then Jonathan Mingo. I mean, the guy had no separation last year, but there was no one else to help. The line was bad. The quarterbacking was bad. So what's happening with him? Is he still a 2, or are they just bringing in talent at this position? And then Jalen Hyatt, I think there's so many issues with the Giants. I don't know if you go and get a Gabe Davis, right? Because you have so much money to spend on so many other holes. But what happens there? They need playmakers. He didn't do it last year. So does he just get pushed to the back of the depth chart because they bring in a free agent or they draft someone? These are the guys that I'm a little bit concerned about.
Fitz, anybody stand out to you that Bogman just hit on that's kind of a good, buy low or sell high?
Quentin Johnston and Treylon Burks are interesting guys. I don't know if I would necessarily buy low on any of them. Put it this way, if you guys had Quentin Johnston on your roster and someone offered you pick 301 in a 12-team Superflex draft, would you take that for Quentin Johnston?
I would without even thinking about it, honestly. I thought he was. I think if you are as bad as he looked, that is like
a guy who was a mid-round pick. Even in Superflex leagues, he was going, like 108?
He wasn't for me,
year?
I will say. I didn't really like him even going into last year, but I recognize that, like, maybe you don't lose that much value that right away, but I do believe in, like, signature significance. If you're that bad, I don't need to see more than 1 year. I'm I'm pretty out. And a 301 in this year's class, I think there's a lot of good options in that range. Like, I would happily accept that.
So
I was
saying pass because I thought I was getting Quentin Johnston. So I'm not taking Quentin Johnston with the 301 because, like Worm said, there might be 12 to 15 wide receivers that are better than him in this class. It's just crazy how bad he looked and how good this class is.
All right, I will say this for the Quentin Johnston shareholders out there, that I can think of one prominent example of a guy who was a complete train wreck as a rookie, and for that matter, also in his second year, and turned out to be a phenomenal wide receiver, Davante Adams.
I knew it.
Davante Adams couldn't catch a cold. Unlike me, he can catch a cold in his first 2 years in Green Bay. But then the light went on for him in year 3, and obviously the rest was history. But Treylon Burks, I think I'm with you, Boggs. It's just, man.
I love him. I think he's talented, but he came into the first camp overweight. He had this asthma issue, which is clearly more than they let on during the draft process, and he has been banged up his entire NFL career. So
knee injury in training camp last year, then that concussion.
That was nasty concussion. That was against Pittsburgh on Thursday night. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So, and you know that the Titans are going to add receivers too.
Yeah.
Probably at least one free agent plus, 1 or 2 rookies. So that's more competition for Burks. Yeah, he's got an uphill struggle to be fantasy viable, I think.
Before we get out of here, I do just want to quickly remind everyone that our mock draft simulator tool is now open at fantasypros.com/simulator. It's a fast and free way to practice for any kind of draft, including dynasty startup drafts and rookie drafts. Again, that's fantasypros.com/simulator. We will get out of there on that. For Fitz, who bravely weathered the cold to be here today, and for Bogman, who bravely weathered the Russell Wilson to the Steelers rumors to be here today. I am Ryan Wormeli. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you again next time.